Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Saturday. Welcome. We're going to do something special tonight. One guest after my monologue. I used to do this, so we're going to do it more often. And a special guest, Victor Davis Hanson. He's worth talking to for a long time. But before I get there, and before I get to my monologue, you're going to be noticing this eye the entire night, so I might as well deal with it in a very, very short way. Some retina problems in both eyes that requires a needle from time to time. I got my needle, I got my red eye. It's that simple. I'm not on drugs. Nobody punched me in the eye. I'm not drunk. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. And I don't get into fistfights. Now, I am sick and tired of the constant drumbeat that somehow Donald Trump is authoritarian. And you bring these guys on, this conga line of Democrats and some, Republicans, and they go on there and they talk about, it's not going to be authoritarian, it is authoritarian. Or, we've lost our democracy. What are we going to do? He's militarizing our cities. I'm so sick of this. These are people who are ignoramuses. They don't know American history. And the funny thing is, the shoe is really on the other foot. The Democrat Party is about sabotage, subterfuge, usurpation. That's what they're about. This is a Democrat Party, as a matter of fact, that wanted to pack the Supreme Court. They've packed the lower courts. Oh, that's very democratic. This is a Democrat Party that wants to eliminate the Electoral College. So all but the most populous states with the biggest cities, they're the only ones that have a say in our government. The incredible lawfare against the President of the United States when he was a private citizen, president, candidate, president again. We've been into that. The 1619 Project, which is a complete repudiation of our founding. All Democrat. DEI, CRT, a complete repudiation of our country. Groups like CARE. This group, CARE, is tied to Hamas, and there are other groups like that. They find a home in the Democrat Party. They work with the Democrat Party. They're supported by the Democrat Party. Economic socialism, that's the new banner of the Democrat Party and their friends in the Democratic Socialist Movement, aka Marxist Islamist movement. What else? They keep changing our election laws to ensure that they win. What do you think of that? They want to add Puerto Rico as a state and the District of Columbia as a state so they can pack the Senate with 4 more Democrats. Very democratic, Lawless sanctuary cities, which go back to really a notion in the Confederacy, that is, nullification of our federal immigration laws. So the open borders are open in violation of federal law. Now they don't want to deport people in violation of federal law. Why? Because they want to use illegal aliens to create more Democrat congressional seats. Very democratic. They have monopoly control over our universities and faculty. They have monopoly control over our teachers' unions, K through 9. They have a massive bureaucracy that really belongs to them. Let's be honest about that. They don't much like the Constitution's separation of power. They're always pushing for the centralization of power. They don't like the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, the Second, the Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth, Ninth, Tenth. They're not very happy with the 14th Amendment either. Folks, they're the authoritarians. They're not fighting for democracy. They wouldn't know democracy if they hit them in the face. That's why I don't call them the Democratic Party. It's the Democrat Party. And then you have sites like the Drudge Report, where Matt Drudge apparently banged his head and has never recovered. It's endless with this hideous propaganda. And you have sites like Mediaite, run by Dan Abrams. Endless propaganda, trying to create the impression that Donald Trump is a one-off, that this guy's a dictator, he's an authoritarian, he's doing things that are so out of the norm. Let's have a little chat, shall we? I'd like to go down history lane here because if I don't, who will? Let's take a look at this, shall we? Let's look at abuses of power, authoritarianism, in some of our greatest presidents. John Adams, we've discussed this, the Sedition Act. He imprisoned several citizens, including 24, 4 of whom were journalists, under his Sedition Act. We have Abraham Lincoln, considered the best president, or the second best president by many, many people, while he shut down 200 pro-peace newspapers, or papers he thought were sympathetic to the Confederacy during the Civil War. That seems to be a big issue. He suspended habeas corpus. Only Congress can do that. Well, that seems to be a big issue. He also confiscated printing materials. He sometimes imprisoned reporters, editors, and publishers. He gave his Secretary of War Stanton enormous powers. Stanton sought the power, and he gave him to do what? To monitor the telegraph, to interfere with telegraph messages, the whole system, in order to influence the outcome. I could go on, but I don't have enough time. I've got to get to the next president. Let's go to Woodrow Wilson, a favorite of the Democrats. He was a racist and a bigot. He believed in eugenics. But that aside for the moment, he also passed a new Espionage Act in 1917 and Sedition Act in 1918. So opponents of Wilson were charged and imprisoned on a scale never seen in American history. He charged 2,000 people, imprisoned about 1,200, including the candidate on the Socialist Party for president of the United States, who ran for president from prison. Wow, what else did he do? He created an elaborate domestic spy network to see which citizens he should charge. When you would go see a movie, at the beginning of the movie, there'd be a little clip brought to you by Woodrow Wilson. More propaganda by the government. I mean, it was incredible what he did. He did other things too. He created the Committee for Public Information. What did they do? 175,000 people were trained to influence the outcome of newspaper reports and to push agendas and propaganda, government information into the media. That's a lot. What about Franklin Roosevelt? Franklin Roosevelt had a war against the press. He established the FCC in 1934. Remember our FCC chairman? Oh my God, we've never seen anything like this before. Oh, we've seen that. We've seen a lot worse. What did he do? Well, it used to be that if you got a radio license, and radio was a big deal then, as it is, I think, a big deal today, but it was really big because there wasn't television and so forth, podcasters. In any event, they had radio licenses. They were for 3 years. What did Roosevelt do? He reduced them to 6 months. He put one of his political hacks in charge, and they made sure that NBC, CBS, other radio companies and networks, that they would abide by the policies of the government, or they didn't get their licenses. And NBC and CBS said as much. We're not going to report as much, disagreeing with the administration policies now. FDR appointed a political confidant to run the IRS. He would order this director to conduct audits of political opponents and newspaper publishers. Gannett, Annenberg, many, many others who were considered Republican. He went after Andrew Mellon, the Treasury Secretary, under President Coolidge. He went after Huey Long, who he feared would defeat him in a primary. He also ordered the IRS to lay off a loyal young congressman they were investigating. You may have heard of this guy from Texas. His name was Lyndon Johnson. At FDR's direction, Senate Democrats subpoenaed tens of thousands of telegrams from Western Union because they didn't like what Western Union was doing. They thought it was run by a Republican, but they also wanted to see all the communications of citizens. Tens of thousands. Oh, it gets worse, but I got to move on. John Kennedy. He also appointed a loyalist to be the IRS commissioner, and he would routinely read tax filings of political opponents, people he had questions about, people who were wealthy, some cases for the fun of it. Some cases he would leak to somebody named Ben Bradley, who at the time was the big gun over at Newsweek. He would eventually go to the Washington Post. But John Paul Getty is a perfect example. And John Kennedy would go after conservative groups. Lyndon Johnson, boy, he was the biggest of the big. He used the IRS, the FBI. He used the CIA. He actually outdid John Kennedy. And he went after his political opponents, businesses, publishers. He spied on the Goldwater campaign. He had bugs by the FBI placed in the Goldwater headquarters. Goldwater figured it out because he was putting out releases, that is the Johnson campaign, before they even made public statements. And of course, they went after a senior official working for the Goldwater campaign who was gay in order to destroy that man's reputation. They leaked information left and right. What else did Johnson do? Well, he directed the FBI to surveil the 1964 Democrat convention in Atlantic City. You see, he didn't trust the Kennedys. He also didn't trust Martin Luther King and other black civil rights leaders. He had their phones bugged, their hotel rooms bugged. Democracy, right, Democrats? Oh, yes. Then Barack Obama. I affectionately call him Barack Milhouse Benito Obama, but that for another day. The Department of Justice secretly subpoenaed and seized from phone companies records for 20 Associated Press phone lines used by 100 reporters, telephone calls, emails between New York Times reporters and government officials, communications between Fox News' James Rosen at the time and the State Department, and communications between reporters in the CIA. We hadn't seen that since Lyndon Johnson, anything like it before. Obama said, I was never involved in scandals. You were dripping in scandal. They tracked James Rosen's whereabouts, his movements. James Risen of the New York Times. They subpoenaed him. They sought his phone and company records. They tried to compel his testimony under the Espionage Act. They threatened to imprison him. Obama used the Espionage Act again on him and others. Obama also spearheaded the assault on Donald Trump, the 2016 campaign, his first presidency, and of course, somehow Donald Trump's taxes were released by the IRS. How? Democracy. You know, these Democrats are for democracy. They don't want anything to do with authoritarianism, you know. Then we have Joe Biden. FBI, IRS, CIA, NDI, all the government was directed, colluded, conspired to take out Donald Trump and his people. When he was a citizen, when he was a candidate, during the transition, the first presidency, and after. They were crushing Donald Trump's civil liberties, crushing them. They had a war on social media. Federal judges have written about it. They were appalling. They haven't seen anything like this since the other Democrat, Woodrow Wilson. Whether it came to vaccines and the pandemic, whether it came to the laptop, Hunter's laptop, the Biden regime had its hands in all of it, trying to censor, trying to plant. They even wanted to set up a special committee like Woodrow Wilson, a misinformation, disinformation committee while they're spewing misinformation and disinformation. Oh, yeah. But here's the latest, of course, the Insurrection Act. We have these lightweight Democrat governors and mayors who hate the cops, who hate federal law enforcement, who hate law and order, and they are special pleaders for illegal aliens. And the more violent and felonious the conduct of the illegal aliens, the more they defend them. And of course, they have their federal judges, more democracy, who were stuffed into our judicial system by Biden and by Schumer, who keep, letting these people go and interfering with the power of the president to do something about it. The Insurrection Act, can you imagine? It sounds so ominous. Who would ever use the Insurrection Act? Only Donald Trump. Because you see, he's militaristic. He uses the military. These cities are being militarized. He doesn't need to do any of this. Well, who else used the Insurrection Act? The Insurrection Act was passed in 1807. It's been used 28 times since by presidents of the United States, starting with Thomas Jefferson in 1808. But even before Thomas Jefferson, even before there was an Insurrection Act, George Washington, you may have heard of him, he used the military in 1794. You may have heard of John Adams. He was our second president. He used the military in 1799. Now, these were men who were actually involved in what? The Constitutional Convention. Wow. They didn't view it as authoritarian. Quite the contrary. They believed they were defending America and the Constitution, as Donald Trump would be today, should he choose to use the Insurrection Act to put down an insurrection of the Democrat Party. Always the Democrat Party. Slavery, segregation, eugenics, Jim Crow, blocking little black kids from going into school with white kids, blocking buses. That's the Democrats. This is who they are. And the Insurrection Act had to be used against them. The Ku Klux Klan. That's right. Let's go through who used the Insurrection Act. We have Thomas Jefferson used the Insurrection Act. Andrew Jackson used it, and some of them used it multiple times. Like Ulysses S. Grant used it multiple times, including to put down the Ku Klux Klan. He was putting down the Ku Klux Klan. He sent the United States Army into the South. He was doing a great job of blowing out the Ku Klux Klan, the last vestiges of the Democrat Party's resistance to humanity and ending slavery. And then the Democrats won the House of Representatives. And you know what they did? They cut off funding for the Army to be used to take out the Ku Klux Klan. And so the remnants of the Ku Klux Klan are even around today. Democrats, but they favor democracy. What else do we have here? I mentioned Grant. Rutherford B. Hayes, he used it more than once. Chester Alan Arthur, he used it. Grover Cleveland used it more than once. Hold on, I'm not done. It's a long list. Who else used it? Woodrow Wilson, another great Democrat, racist segregationist. Warren Harding used it. Who else? Herbert Hoover, Franklin Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, John Kennedy on multiple occasions, Lyndon Johnson on multiple occasions, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush on multiple occasions, 28 times. Wow, were they all authoritarians? You see, this junk that we are fed by the media, which regurgitates what they're told to do by the Democrats. When you watch Meet the Press or Face the Nation or these shows, or if you dare to watch their network programming or some of these other cable channels, you're going to hear this stuff about Trump the authoritarian over and over and over again. And the Democrats, the little d Democrats, you know, they're trying to defend the country from an authoritarian. The Democrats are authoritarian. They've always been authoritarian. They reject the Constitution and separation of powers. They're the ones who reject the outcome of elections, like they're rejecting the outcome of the last election with their judges, who are interfering in every single aspect of the presidency. That's right. They're the ones who seek to change the citizenry of the country because they don't much like the way that we vote. And that way they can pick up more congressional seats. They hope they'll have birthright citizenship. And the Democrat Party can only win. And if they can't, let's get rid of the Electoral College. So only the 11 or 12 most populous states, almost all of which are Democrat, not all, but most of which, they'll control the country. And we'll call it democracy. I have an idea. Let's load up the Supreme Court. Let's add more seats. That way we can get our ideologues on the Supreme Court, create really a Democrat Politburo, and then clothe it in democracy. You know, Bernie Sanders, a Marxist. He's a little d Democrat socialist. Mondami, a little d Democrat socialist. All for the centralization of power and disenfranchising the voter. Oh, you'll go through the voting process, but all the decisions will be made without you. Tomorrow night, I want to dig in further on this immigration issue. I want to dig in further on ICE. I want to dig in further what these Democrat city mayors and Democrat governors are doing, because, ladies and gentlemen, what they are doing is not only akin to the old Confederacy in the South, which I've discussed here multiple times. What they are doing is destroying the country and ripping it apart. Some of them want to be president of the United States. Some of them are more qualified to be president of the old Confederacy because they're using their tactics and principles to a different end, but the same means.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.